The New York Mets leaned heavily on rookie starting pitchers down the stretch as they try to save their 2025 season. In 2026, what can they expect from the rookies? We're going to talk about that and more on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the number one daily podcast in the New York Mets. If you want to find any of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Now, at the end of this past season, we saw the Mets just go all in on their rookies. It was first Nolan McLean who came up and immediately became their ace. Then it was Jonah Tong. Finally, it was Brandon Sproat. They got 17 starts between the three of them down the stretch. Obviously, it didn't work out well enough because the Mets did not make the playoffs. But as you turn the page and look to 2026, these are three very talented starting pitchers that could all conceivably be part of your 2026 rotation. So the question we're going to try to answer on the show today is, how much can you expect from those guys, and how does that impact what you do this offseason? So we'll start at the very top. Nolan McLean is going to be in the Mets big league rotation. There's no question about that. He was their ace at the end of the season, which is a testament to McLean. And also, it is a statement about how bad things got with the veteran stars the Mets have. But you look at what McLean did. 8 starts, a 2.06 ERA, struck out 57 batters in just shy of 50 innings pitched, which is important because he is still PPI eligible. That is prospect promotion incentive. And these are the rules that are supposed to incentivize teams for starting their top prospects at the big league level as soon as they're ready. So if that guy has an amazing spring training, and I'm not just talking about McLean, I'm talking about any prospect, you want them to start on a big league roster, because if they are ready, then they should be up, and this is supposed to curtail some service time manipulation, because if at the end of the day, that player is either the rookie of the year or finishes in the top 3 of Cy Young or MVP voting across their first 3 seasons, you are going to be awarded a comp pick, and that's a very valuable comp pick. I believe after the first round, in that comp round between the first and the second round, those picks are huge. The New York Mets, I believe right now, unless they win the lottery, their draft slot came in at number 17, but because they're a repeat luxury tax offender, that's going to drop 10 slots. So just to put that into context, let's just say next year, the Mets end up going on a deep playoff run, and they're due to pick, let's just say 28th, which would be a really deep playoff run. But if that's the case, and then their pick drops 10 slots, a comp pick for Nolan McLean winning Rookie of the Year might be right up with your first round pick. So it really is an incredible value if the Mets can find a way to get a Rookie of the Year next season and get that pick. Nolan McLean's their best shot at it, although Carson Bench and Jet Williams, we talked about last week, are other guys that could go out there and win Rookie of the Year. Technically, so could Jonah Tong, so could Brandon Sproat for that matter. But McLean really is going to go into next year as one of the favorites, if not the favorite in the National League after what we saw from him down the stretch. 8 brilliant starts, 2.06 ERA, struck out 57 batters again. Just dominant stuff. You can't expect him to pitch to that level again, as far as, well, you can expect him to pitch to that level, but to sustain that over a full season is setting the bar a little bit higher than I think we should, because that's basically saying, hey, Nolan McLean, you're going to be Paul Skeens, and there's only one Paul Skeens. Okay, Tarek Skubal is the best pitcher in baseball right now. Paul Skeens is a 1B to Skubal's 1A, but for Skubal, he didn't just hit the ground running and become this. It took time to get there. For McLean, do I think he could be the Mets ace next season? Absolutely, I do. But do I think the Mets should expect him to be their ace next season? Should they expect him to pitch to an ERA in the 2s? I don't think you can go into the season with that expectation because that's just putting a lot on this guy's shoulders in his first full season in the big leagues. Now, if anybody can handle it, if anybody can do it, it's Nolan McLean. He had an unbelievable season. He started in Double-A, was too good for that level, got brought up to Triple-A, was there for a majority of the season, then, of course, finished in the big leagues. Altogether, he made 26 starts, but pitched in 29 games. There was 3 games when he was in, I believe, all of them in Triple-A, where there was a rehabbing major leaguer that he piggybacked. I believe it was Frankie Montas a couple times at least. Bottom line, though, let's just call it 29 starts. That's essentially what it was. He still pitched bulk relief and all of those outings out of the pen. He pitched to a 2.34 ERA in 161 and 2/3 innings pitched. Now, that represents over a 50-inning jump from what he threw the year prior. So that is a massive spike in innings. And honestly, for that alone, it's almost a good thing the Mets didn't make a deep playoff run because you would have been getting McLean into a territory that might be a little bit scary as far as how much of an innings jump he went through in one season. But he finished the year strong. He looked to be in great shape. Looked like he still had plenty left in the tank. And that should lead the Mets to believe that with a good offseason here, he could come back, hit the ground running, and be a part of this rotation from opening day all the way through to the end of the year. I think you feel good about McLean in that regard, as well as Clay Holmes and David Peterson. I think everything else is in flux, which is where we talk about what the Mets have to do this offseason. We've been saying it on episode after episode. They got to go out and get an ace because Nolan McLean should not be your opening day starter. And he also should not be your opening day starter because you're being deferential to a veteran like a Sean Manaea or a Kodai Senga or Clay Holmes, whatever it is. Nolan McLean should not be your opening day starter because you should go out and get a veteran that deserves that honor. That is a bona fide, clear-cut ace. Whether that is signing somebody or I think more likely trading for somebody, the Mets need to make it so that Nolan McLean is at worst your number 2 starter. You're at worst at best. I don't even know how I should have said that. Regardless, you want to go into next season where on your depth chart for your rotation, McLean's somewhere in the middle of that rotation, not at the very, very top. Could he end up outperforming whatever acquisition you pick up? Sure, but that would just be a good problem to have. You need to make sure you go out and get an ace that knocks everybody down a peg, because even if you just get an ace, you look at Nolan McLean, David Peterson, and Clay Holmes. To me, that is a solid middle of your rotation. And then if you have Sean Manaea and Kodai Senga battling it out for a 5th and 6th spot in the rotation with Brandon Sproat and Jonah Tong pushing them, well, that's where you want to be. So I think that's what the Mets have to be going into this offseason thinking about and how they should be viewing Nolan McLean. They shouldn't be thinking, oh, well, maybe he'll start the year in AAA. No, Nolan McLean is part of your big league rotation. I just don't think that it's wise to go into this upcoming season and say, yep, that's the guy. He's the ace right now from Jump Street. Put him on the mound on opening day, and he's got to lead this rotation because it is asking a ton out of a guy that's going to be going through his first full big league season, will still be a rookie. So I think the Mets need to have that in mind and make sure they get a really good starter to pair with a Nolan McLean. What we're going to talk about next, though, should Brandon Sproat or Jonah Tong crack an opening day rotation? Where should the organization view them going into 2026? We're going to go through it all in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season's here. FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. You're going to get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Just pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you're going to unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to play, whether it's player props, building a same-game parlay, even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes watching football even more exciting. You got a little more action riding on the game. Whether you're a casual fan or you love diving into the stats, FanDuel is going to make the game day experience so much better. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. So let's talk about the other rookies that could be making a big impact on this rotation next year. And we'll start off with the guy that debuted first, Jonah Tong. Tong was the most dominant pitcher in minor league baseball this year. 1.43 ERA and 113 and 2/3 innings pitched with 179 strikeouts. He had 22 strikeouts in 18 and 2/3 innings in the big league. So altogether, he struck out just over 200 in 130 plus innings pitched. Pretty incredible what he was able to do from a strikeout perspective and how well he did at run prevention in the minors. In the big leagues, it was ugly, a 7.71 ERA, and we saw everything I was concerned about when he got promoted come to light once he was on the biggest of stages. And that's just the fact that this guy was getting by in the minor leagues, and not even getting by. This guy was thriving in the minor leagues with two pitches, his fastball and his changeup. There was a lot of outings where he could throw just those two pitches 90% of the time and strike out 10, okay, because his fastball is that good. The problem when you get to the big leagues, guys can hit anyone's fastball. There is not a fastball on the planet, even Aroldis Chapman or Mason Miller, any of these guys, they still, if they're not locating, if they don't have something to get people off their heater, guys can sit fastball and time up anything. And yes, Jonah Tong has the type of fastball with the ride that he generates with his over-the-top delivery that can live in the zone and guys could not square it up at all. But he's going to get burned sometimes. And he's also going to have guys who are going to be able to extend at bats with that fastball, where they'll be able to get a piece of it and keep getting a piece of it and wearing him down. And then if they can just eliminate your other pitches, well, eventually they're either going to catch up to the fastball or he's going to walk guys and he's going to get into walk trouble. And then once you start to load the bases, then a couple hits kill you. And so for Jonah Tong, he needs to figure out a way to get guys off of his fastball so that his best pitch can play. And the changeup is a good weapon, but he needs something else. And I think one of the biggest things that you saw, which again, what we were talking about before he came up, was just the inability to throw a breaking ball for a strike. You know, he could throw a good curveball, and if you're not expecting, you might swing through it. But big league hitters can read the scouting report. They can see that you're not landing that curveball for a strike often. And so if they can identify it, they can just spit on it. And they could just look at fastball changeup. And then you're really able to kind of focus on just the speed and not have to worry too much about what else is going to come. Like if you can focus on just two pitches, if you're a reliever, maybe you can get by like that. But as a starting pitcher, turning lineups over 2 to 3 times, it's just not going to work. He has to find a way to make that curveball a little more effective. And even more importantly, I think, is trying to get a slider that works for him, or whether it's a slider or a cutter, just something that he can throw in the zone that, can make sense to him. Maybe it's a gyro slider. We see guys who are good fastball pitchers who do a little better with the gyro. So maybe that's what he's got to do. But he's got to find some other offering that he can go to. So if he's behind an account 2-0, he can flip in a curveball or backdoor slider, whatever it is, and steal a strike when a guy might just be sitting fastball. Because if they're sitting fastball 2-0 and you don't have another pitch to go to, either you're going to go to the fastball and they're going to time it up and they could crush it, or they're going to end up, looking at that curveball or that changeup. And if you're not landing it, well, now they're 3-0, and now they're sitting in an even better position. So that's what Tong needs to work on, and he has an offseason to try to iron it out and see what it looks like in spring training. But I think Jonah Tong, who made 2 starts in AAA, I think he's the opening day starter in Syracuse. I think that's how things are going to work out for him. And I still believe that he will make an impact next year. I just think it's going to take a little more development, showing it again and earning a promotion from AAA. And then I think if the Mets have a need in their rotation, as soon as May or June, Jonah Tong could be the first guy up from AAA. Now, Brandon Sproat is in an interesting spot because I think he falls into the Tyler McGill slide in my eyes. McGill got Tommy John surgery. He's not going to be part of the team next year. The last couple seasons, really dating back to after his rookie season in 2021, every single year, Tyler McGill would enter camp as the 7th or 8th starter on the depth chart. And every year he'd find his way in the rotation because injuries happen. So I think that's where Brandon Sproat's going to go into camp, where he's not going to be expected to be part of your big league rotation, but he certainly has a shot to break camp. And some things have to go his way to make that happen. You might need to see a couple guys to go down or to be pitching really bad in spring training. But I think Sproat is big league ready. I think he proved that down the stretch. He looked solid enough in his big league outings. And he was dominant after June 28th. That was sort of the line in the sand where Brandon Sproat turned his season around with the mantra, let it eat, where he just got back to throwing the ball as hard as he could, whether he was going for his fastballs or his breaking pitches. He just got back to letting it rip and not trying to be too fine, not trying to be too perfect on the mound. And the result was a completely different guy because the beginning of the season, he gave up 41 earned runs in 15 starts and 62 innings pitched. Now, I put that into context. Nolan McLean gave up 42 earned runs all season and 161 and 2/3 innings pitched. That's a drastic difference between those two guys. Now, Sproat, though, over his final 11 outings in Syracuse, gave up 16 runs in 59 innings for a 2.44 ERA. One of those appearances was a relief appearance. They were trying to see if he could pitch out of the bullpen, where he gave up 5 earned runs in 3 2/3. So if you just focus in on his 10 starts, the numbers would have been even better. His final 10 starts in Syracuse. Comes up to the big leagues, made 4 starts, pitched to a 4.79 ERA, and he got over 140 innings pitched. So he is sort of set up here for a pretty good workload in 2026. I don't think, again, that Sproat needs any more time in the minor leagues. I really don't. Honestly, I even think that if he can crack the team out of the bullpen as a guy that can give you 3-4 innings out of the pen a couple times a week, that could be a nice role for Sproat if the rotation falls into line where they don't need him at the start of this season. Now, because he has options, you absolutely can send him down to AAA. You have that roster flexibility, and then whenever you have a need, you can call him up. But I think that while Brandon Sproat should not be penciled into the opening day rotation, I do think he should be given a very fair chance to try to make the team in some capacity. And again, it very well could be as the Mets' 5th or 6th starter, depending on if they're going to go to a 5-man or a 6-man rotation and what they get from the rest of the veterans and, of course, who they acquire. But I look at Brandon Sproat, and I think he is going to have a pretty big role in the team next year. I think Jonah Tong will as well. I just think for Tong, that start date for his impact on the big league roster is maybe more middle of the season instead of at the beginning of the season. So that's where I think the Mets are at with their top 3 rookie pitchers. But there are some more arms I want to discuss, namely Christian Scott coming off of the injured list, his first full season after Tommy John surgery after he spent this past year rehabbing. But we're also going to talk about some prospects and how the Mets are going to leverage all their pitching depth this offseason. Are they going to make trades? How many signings do they have to make? We're going to go through it all to close out the show here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Rugiet Go Long. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis, maybe even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Go Long. This isn't just another ED pill, it's a total game changer for your confidence. Go Long combines 2 doctor-trusted medications in one dual-action formula so you can get hard and go the distance. The effects can last up to 36 hours. That's confidence all day, all night, even into the next day, and the process is simple. You're going to connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online, and if prescribed, your treatment will get shipped directly to your door discreetly. Ready to level up your confidence in the bedroom? Head to Rugiet.com. That's Rugiet, Rugiet.com, and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB for 15% off your first order. That's Rugiet, Rugiet.com, promo code LOCKEDONMLB. Make sure to use our code so they know that we sent you. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. It's our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways and get the live graphics sent to your phone each day so you know there's no starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description and go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. So when we talk about big league starting pitching depth, Christian Scott should be in the conversation come spring training, but he's the ultimate wild card because he didn't pitch this past year in competition. I'm sure he did a ton of work and faced a lot of live batters at the end of the season in St. Lucie, and I'm sure he's still doing some of that right now, but he did not get into any games, and that was by design. The Mets wanted to keep him out of competition, just have him focus on rehabbing and getting his arm right, and then in 2026, he will be deployed again, and we'll see where he ends up. I'd imagine it's going to be starting the season in Syracuse just to get his legs under him. You know, very similar to Ronnie Mauricio and what we talked about this past year, where it felt like Mauricio needed time in Syracuse and needed a runway there to just get himself in game shape again. I think for Christian Scott, that's even more a priority because of the Tommy John surgery. Also, this is a guy that has never pitched much. He's never pitched 100 innings in a Mets uniform. Any combining affiliates, it doesn't matter. His most innings pitched was before he went down with that injury in 2024. He pitched 89 and 2/3 innings, pretty much split down the middle between AAA and the big leagues. He made 9 starts in Syracuse, pitched to a 2.76 ERA, made 9 starts in the big leagues and pitched to a 4.56 ERA. And if you remember those starts and you want to compare him to the guys we saw this year, obviously it wasn't Nolan McLean dominant, but I think Christian Scott would be right there with what we just saw from Brandon Sproat, a guy that still has some learning to do at the big league level, but showcased some really good stuff. And honestly, I would even say that Christian Scott probably looked a little bit better than Brandon Sproat did when he had his chances in the big leagues. So now as you're looking ahead, he is a big league caliber arm. It's just a matter of getting him in a place where he can contribute. And also, it's just you have no idea what to expect out of him when it comes to the innings he's going to throw in this season. To me, I look at Christian Scott as just more depth, but not depth that you're really counting on. I think the more that I start to chew on it and really look at the Mets offseason plans, I think they need the ace first and foremost, right? We've talked about it. It's so imperative that they get a guy that can lead this rotation. They got McLean, Peterson, and Holmes as the middle of the rotation. Manaea and Senga are getting paid a lot of money, particularly Manaea, and I think you can expect that Manaea has a healthy offseason, and if he's healthy in camp, he's going to be in the rotation. Senga would turn into a 6-man rotation. So with that in mind, you don't need to go out and add anybody else beyond the ace, but because there's still some question marks about how quickly can Jonah Tong contribute, because it's still just young arms who throw hard and you just never know who's going to stay healthy, who's not, because Christian Scott is already coming off the TJ and you really can't just go into the season expecting too much from him. I think it would make sense for the Mets to get an ace and a project. What I mean by a project is signing this year's Griffin Canning. So not investing $17 million in a back-end starter, but finding the guy that's hanging out in the market that you believe in his stuff, that maybe is a little bit younger than the rest, maybe it's someone that got non-tendered, and picking up that guy and saying maybe he's a bullpen arm, maybe he's part of our rotation if things don't break right, maybe we cut him a month into the season if it's not going well. But I think the Mets should be looking for 2 starting pitchers this offseason. I just don't think they have to get their number 1 and number 2 starters. I think with what they have with McLean, Peterson, Holmes, and then still having a Sproat, still having a Tong, still having Manaea and Senga, I don't think they have to go out and get 2 aces, so to speak. But they should add to this depth, because while they have plenty of depth in the system, big league depth, it can evaporate quickly. And so I would want to go into the season looking at Jonah Tong and Christian Scott in particular as just gravy. Whatever you get from them, that's just extra. I think you can count on Sproat to have a role, and you obviously can count on McLean to be in the rotation. That's the way I look at what the Mets have when it comes to their depth with all these young guys. Now, beyond that, though, just to go through the incredible what's the word I'm looking? Wealth of riches, the abundance of riches. I don't know why I feel like I'm not turning that phrase correctly. Regardless, the Mets have a lot of pitching prospects that could be a phone call away and a promotion away next year, because Jack Wenniger is likely starting the season in Syracuse. He made 26 starts in Double-A, pitched to a 2.92 ERA, struck out 147 and 135 and 2/3 innings pitched. Then in the playoffs, he really did help lead the Rumble Ponies to a championship. Struck out 11 over 5 innings of 2-run ball in the championship-winning game. In the semis, he struck out 9 in 6 scoreless innings. So he was great when the moment was the biggest, and he just had a really solid season. I think Wenniger is right there pitching after Tong like he did this past season, but in Syracuse to open up 2026. Jonathan Santucci could theoretically start the year in AAA as well. He opened up the season in High A, did not pitch well, had an 8.41 ERA across his first 6 starts. Over his next 19 starts, he was one of the best pitchers in minor league baseball, across 96 and 2/3 innings pitched. He had a 1.96 ERA, 31% strikeout rate, 8.7% walk rate, 50% ground ball rate. Opponents hit 181 with a 255 on base and a 239 slug against him. That's dominant stuff. In Double-A, he made 10 starts to a 2.52 ERA with 63 strikeouts in 50 innings pitched. Just really, really good work from Santucci. This is a guy that was once really highly regarded when it came to his draft stock before an injury the year prior to getting drafted. He was looking like a guy that could have been a top 10 pick. The Mets get him in, I think, the second round, if I'm not mistaken, for Santucci. And boy, does he look like an absolute steal. Yeah, second round pick in 2024, but a first round talent. And again, I think he probably starts the year in AAA. Every chance that he will, because of how well he handled himself in Double-A. Or maybe for him, it's similar to Nolan McLean this past year, where it's all right, we're going to start you in double, but if you pick up where you left off and make 5 really good starts, you're up to triple. So I think that's also a possibility. Now you have RJ Gordon, who pitched to a 3.06 ERA in High A, came up to Double-A and pitched to a 3.69 ERA in 61 innings pitched. That's another option. Zach Thornton, who was unbelievable this year until an oblique injury, ended up cutting his season short. He had a 0.44 ERA in 4 starts in High A, gets the call up to Double-A, makes 10 starts there, pitched to a 2.60 ERA. He's got incredible command. This is a left-handed pitcher as well. He's another guy that I really like, who should start the year in Double-A and obviously still needs plenty of time in double, if not AAA as well, before he's big league ready. But I mean, this is just yet another starting pitcher that's in the upper levels, and that just has to make you feel good knowing that you have more depth along the way. Will Watson started the year in Low A, ended up in Double-A by the end of the year, pitched to a 3.66 ERA in 39 1/3 innings pitched in St. Lucie. In Brooklyn, he pitched to a 1.70 ERA in 63 2/3 innings pitched. And then he held his own in Double-A, pitched to a 3.44 ERA in 18 1/3. So you put it all together, he had pitched to a 2.60 ERA and 121 1/3 innings pitched. He is definitely one of the more exciting pitching prospects the Mets have. Now, none of these guys is necessarily MLB depth right now. But you count it out, you got, again, Wenniger, Santucci, RJ Gordon, Zach Thornton, and Will Watson. That's 5 pitchers that ended the year in Double-A. 5 that all pitched well in Double-A. I imagine that, again, Wenniger and Santucci maybe start the year in triple. But remember, this past season, Jonah Tong and Brandon Sproat and Nolan McLean, they were all in the minor leagues to start the season. For McLean and Tong, they started in Double-A, and they ended up in the big leagues. So you never know. You can't completely discount those guys. The one thing I'll say, though, that also gives you 5 arms in the upper levels of the minor leagues that you can put on the trade block to go get that ace, where you don't have to trade Jonah Tong to get the ace necessarily, because you can trade Jack Wenniger and Ryan Clifford as the start of a package to get you an ace. And those guys are really good prospects. So the Mets are sitting pretty just because of how much pitching they continue to develop, how they really are turning into a pitching factory, churning out arms. And that just gives them the flexibility to attack the trade market and, know that they can deal from an area of strength and still have more left over So they have arms that are coming up and able to make starts on the cheap, which is what you get when you have a bunch of rookie starters. That allows you to have the more high-cost veterans. They sort of average each other out. Nolan McLean's going to be a huge part of the team next year. I think Brandon Sproat will as well. And Jonah Tong is definitely going to be a guy that gets some real consideration to be in the big leagues. Christian Scott, definitely a wild card, but I think altogether, you just look at the depth that this organization has, and you have to feel pretty good about where they're at. They got to make the right decisions. They got to figure out how to put together a winning team in 2026. But the resources that this franchise has, it's pretty unbelievable just how many pitching prospects that you can look at and say, yeah, they might be a big league starting pitcher for the New York Mets in 2026, if not 2027. It's a lot of arms, and you only have so many spots in the rotation. So that's where you have the ability to do a lot of creative things with those arms, whether it is trading them or whether it's bolstering your bullpen. Maybe you eventually get to a point where you say, you know what? Christian Scott's going to be coming out of the bullpen this season just because we're easing him in with his innings. He's still going to pitch, 3-4 innings at a time, but that's what we're going to do with him when he gets up to the show. You can do the same thing with a Brandon Sproat. They just have so many options at their disposal now, and it does give you some hope that what the Mets have been waiting for since the Steve Cohen era began could finally be coming into play, where you have the big league team that gets accented all the time, that gets fortified all the time from these prospects that are either helping you on the trade market, getting more big league pieces, or because they're going to come up and be able to do the job. And we've seen throughout the playoffs this year, so many teams that have these young arms that they've been able to count on coming out of the bullpen that are giving them 2-3 innings at a time that are really impactful. And I think if the Mets were able to make the playoffs next year, they'd have a lot of guys like that would be in consideration to just help a playoff bullpen get through all the wildness of October. But going into next season, which rookie starting pitcher is definitely in the rotation? It's McLean. What can they expect from the other guys? I think you could say that you'll get 30 starts between Brandon Sproat, Jonah Tong, and Christian Scott. Now, that might be 25 starts from Brandon Sproat and 5 starts from Tong. It could go any which way. It could be 15 from Sproat early in the year, and then maybe Tong takes over. It could be that Christian Scott makes 8 starts and Tong makes 12, and that gets you to 20, and that would mean that Sproat makes 10 or even 15. But the Mets are going to get contributions from those guys. That's the bottom line. And they have more waiting along the way where, again, the Mets don't have to go into this offseason and sign 3 starting pitchers. They don't have to do that. They just have to get themselves an ace. Anyway, that's going to be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. I'll be back with another show on Monday, as we'll be talking about more offseason topics as well as season recap topics. Figure out exactly where we're going to go next, but it should be fun as we continue to close the book on 2025 and really look ahead to what should be a much better year, you would hope, in 2026. Again, as always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports with insight from our local experts and league-wide experts that'll take you through all the action. You can find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.